I'm Omar Binno, and you're watching Welcome to the D.
All right, today on Welcome to the D, we're very happy to have with us my great friend and a true inspiration to many, Omar Binno. Omar, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Thanks for coming on, man. I know. Let's dig right in. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I was born on November 16th, 1971. I was born in the D, actually.
Which hospital?
Beaumont.
Beaumont,
in Royal
all
Oak.
right.
That's where we were. And I was born with an eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa, which caused me to be blind from birth. It's a disease that is progressively gets worse as you get older. What happens is the cells at the back of the eye near the retina start deteriorating. For everybody it's different ages, but for me it started deteriorating, I would say in my very late teens to early 20s. I noticed a difference. By my mid 20s it was, very noticeably getting worse. And now I'm 51 years old, and it's pretty much all I can see is vague shades of light.
So there was a time you were able to see fairly well and play video games and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, oh yeah. Mark, I'm sure you remember the Atari 2600.
Oh yeah, the classic.
There you go. All the great games: Donkey Kong, Pitfall, Frogger. Yeah. So I used to play video games, and I also used to be able to ride my bike up and down our subdivision with no problem. Of course, I had my share of falls and scabbed knees and bruised ankles and whatnot, but who didn't at that age? So yeah, I was able to do all that, and later on, I had friends and cousins who actually would let me drive their car so I could experience that feeling as well.
Nice. So what were your favorite memories growing up? Did you hang out at Tel 12 Mall?
I did.
Yeah.
With that choo-choo train that would go around the mall?
Yep.
Oh yeah. Tel 12, we had 12 Oaks, that came around later as well.
Later on, yeah.
Yeah, so just hanging out at the mall. But I would say growing up, the summertime was definitely my favorite. My mom was sort of a spearheader among the relatives. She would put together these, family picnics and trips up at Four Bears Water Park. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah, I remember Four Bears.
Yep, and then we had Camp Dearborn, Cass Lake, Dodge Park. So I would say growing up, those were some of my greatest memories and fun times. I went to school. I was from first to from kindergarten to part of my fourth grade, I was actually at a special needs schools out in Pontiac. Mm-hmm. And then my parents had me transferred over to Doherty Elementary, which was just a public school for regular people. So I kind of set a precedence, within the community by them having me do that.
And that's very impressive that you said your mom fought for that to get you into the regular classroom, right?
Yep, they both, my parents both, were in constant contact with the administrators and the board over there, and until they finally made it happen. And in the middle of my fourth grade year, I switched over to Doherty Elementary. I finished there, then went to Orchard Lake Middle School, and after that went to West Bloomfield High School and graduated from there in the year of 1990.
Wow.
After that, I went to Oakland Community College for about 3 years. I got my associates in liberal arts, and in 1993 I started my courses at University of Detroit Mercy, where I obtained a double major in English Literature and Communications in 1997. Following that, I went to University of Detroit Mercy also and got my master's in liberal studies, which was basically a program that you could self-design and focus on the areas you wanted to. So I focused on public relations and marketing under the auspices of that program, which is called liberal studies.
And you accomplished so much in between. So you tell us about you setting the weightlifting record in high school.
So I'll start with my music because that was the earliest thing. About 5 or 6 years old, I used to go to the Kmart on 12 and Telegraph that was across Tel 12 Mall. Remember that one?
Yep.
So they used to have like little electric pianos there, and I would start, playing songs like Jingle Bells or Mary Had a Little Lamb just by listening, and I could go there and play. So at that time we lived in Southfield in some townhouses, but in 1978 we moved to West Bloomfield, and my parents got me a piano instructor. And so he started training me. It was all by ear. He would show me what to play, and we would record it on a tape recorder, and I would learn it, and next week he'd come in and we'd go through the next steps. So there was no reading music. It was all done by ear.
Well, the incredible part is that you have perfect pitch. When did you realize you had perfect pitch?
So I had a different piano instructor. It was in the mid-90s, and one day he came in and he was just kind of evaluating me, and he would play notes and I would tell him what they were, and he's like, "Man, you got perfect pitch." At that time I'm like, "What's that?" He's like, "It means you can tell what note it is, just by listening to it." And from what I understood is that perfect pitch is actually genetic. It has nothing to do with being blind. So it's something that you inherit.
Yeah, because you can study all you want and practice all you want, but it's kind of weird. Like you said, perfect pitch is not something that you could really learn. It's kind of innate.
Yep, that's what it is.
So from piano player, you developed perfect pitch. How did you get into producing? And you became a producer.
As the 90s progressed, technology advanced, for the blind and for other disabled individuals. And so in the 2000s, of course, they came out with screen reading software that could read the music programming software like Sonar or other software that was used for PC. And so it would read it. So I was always influenced, growing up by artists like Elton John, Phil Collins, the group Chicago, Journey, and so my style became sort of pop. I was trained, by a classical instructor, but I always veered more towards pop in my endeavors and my passion. That's really where it was. So by the time the technology came around, I really started enjoying composing music and even copying and replicating the music of these guys, and seeing the technology advance, it kind of motivated me, and I sat down one day and said, I'd love to get into recording and producing. So it was about the year, I would say 2006, when I actually brought in a blind producer who worked for a small company that manufactured the software that would read the music software. I brought him in from another state. I forget where he was from, but he actually went through some training with me for about 3 days while he was here. I paid for his hotel and everything. And so that really was what got me started in that. Ever since then, I've been in love with production and studio work. So that's what got me started.
Well, the incredible part to me is not only that you know how to record and use the software and all that stuff, besides that, playing the piano and knowing about Middle Eastern music and quarter tones, how they work, and all these kind of things. Like, how did you get into learning that kind of music, which is even more in depth, with the quarter tones?
Ever since I was a kid, I would sing along with Arabic or Chaldean songs. I would sing along with them, and I even sang at my own communion with the band that we had hired there. Sang Arabic songs with them. So I just, kind of grew up with it, and because of that, it kind of became natural. Had a natural ear for it.
Well, then you led your own Arabic band, and then on top of that, you're also the leader of the choir at church.
Yeah.
So all that type of music. And then we worked together on a project,
right,
which was a really good time. We worked together on a project. Why don't you talk about that project we did?
Well, actually, we did a couple of them. We did Information Overload.
Oh yeah, whole album. That took 2 years to record in 2 different studios.
Right. With me falling asleep half the time because we were there till midnight. And the other half I was hitting delete and then undo. So yeah. So that was a fun project. It was a great learning experience. And then 2015. In 2014 you had the ISIS takeover in Iraq. And 2015 came around, and Mark, you and I sat down and said, we want to do something for our community. We want to do something for these kids who have been, and their families who have been exiled from their homeland, and are living in poverty or in, desolation or whatever. And so we got together, and I knew two girls who were great singers. And so we sat down with them and we collaborated, and Mark had, great lyrics came up, and the girls actually came up with the melody. And, we produced a song. I did the production, the keyboards, the drums. We had, I believe we had Tony Green on bass, right?
Yeah, Tony Green, T-Money Green on bass, and who's played with some great artists, including Dramatics and Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre. Tony's just a great guy to work with.
Phenomenal.
And so, between the whole team putting this thing together, the writing, and, us collaborating on putting together the music and the girls singing, it was just a great project. Wilson Sarkis shot the video for us. And matter of fact, let's take a look at that.
Searching for the light, living in the mercy of God's hand, yearning for shelter in a barren land. One love, we stand together in His light above. One love, we stand together like a peaceful dove. One heart with the strength of Jesus deep in our souls. You can take our homes buried in the sand, but true hope lies in the Savior of man. My soul is weary, but I still believe. I land with lions, but I won't concede. I live like a leper in this dry land, for the drop of water from your merciful hand. We walk by faith and not by sight, living in the darkness, searching for the light, living in the mercy of God's hand, yearning for shelter in a barren land. One love, we stand together in His light above. One love, we stand together like a peaceful dove. One heart with the strength of Jesus deep in our souls. You can take our homes buried in the sand, but true hope lies in the Savior of man.
Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take.
Oh, save the sacred children through Jesus Christ, our Savior. One love, we stand together in His light above. One love, we stand together like a peaceful dove. One heart with the strength of Jesus deep in our souls. You can take our homes buried in the sand, but true hope lies in the Savior of man.
All right, I want to go back to the Information Overload album.
Sure.
That was a heck of a project.
Yep.
2 years, 2 studios.
Plenty of sleep sessions.
Yeah. It was,
Plenty of delete
every
sessions.
time I'd go, I'd be recording a part, come back in the control booth, Omar's nodded off, and it's like, don't worry, I deleted it. I'm like, I didn't want that part deleted. I wanted to hear it back, you know? But that was that was my 5th album. We got album number 13 coming up. That album was, the importance of that album was the level of experimentation that we did as producers on that.
Yep.
As far as like, whether it's like different like things being sampled in, or I don't know, production, keyboard parts, special effects, whatever we did a lot of experimenting, and it was an eye-opener of what you can get done in the studio.
It was definitely a long and tedious project, but it was definitely well worth the time invested. Like you said, we all learned so much from it. I mean, it was my first time, believe it or not, doing like miking real drums in a studio and recording them, as well as, you know, miking your guitar and doing the bass and whatnot. So it was a great learning experience overall.
Yeah, and I mean, like composing that intro to Fall from Grace and all the other stuff was just like it was a lot of fun and it was a lot of work, but I was really happy with the final product came out great. And the album took long because also I think we had 17 songs on that album.
That's right.
That was a long, and we started with 20.
Yep.
We whittled it down.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, average album has like 8 to 10 songs. It was really a double album if you think about how much music we had on there.
Absolutely. Well, we actually did record, I believe, 20 songs, and then you took out the 3 without publishing.
Yeah, we started them, and then we just said, all right, we're going to scrap these 3 and stick with the 17.
Yep.
What a fun album.
Definitely a good album.
All right, we're going to take a minute here to pay the bills, get some information on our show, and see if you'd like to be a sponsor.
Detroit, a city that's made its own path in innovation, entertainment, and athletics. Built by working hands, born in factories, embodied in success. No frills, gimmicks, shortcuts, or hype. Welcome to the city that raised muscle cars. Welcome to the city that brought you timeless music. Welcome to the city that put the world on wheels. Welcome to the city that brought you legends. Welcome to the D. Order now at welcometothed.com.
All right, we're back. I want to cruise back. We missed a couple of points here I want to talk about.
Sure.
Tell us about you setting the weightlifting record in high school.
So it's funny, ever since I was a kid, I think my first inspiration that led me to start to be curious about weightlifting and muscle development was Lou Ferrigno and the Incredible Hulk show. Do you remember that show?
Oh, heck yeah.
You know,
Who didn't watch that show back then?
Exactly. I mean, and you had Ferrigno, who was a giant, 6'5" and 300 pounder. And then I became familiar with Arnold Schwarzenegger when he came out with the Conan movies. Another phenomenal figure.
And Pumping Iron was his video, wasn't it?
Yeah, well that was actually in the 70s.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So after that, I got into pro wrestling, and those guys, of course, were monsters. A lot of them.
Oh, the steroid days when it was legal.
Right.
Those guys were huge.
Yep, exactly. And I would say my 2 favorites, and they became my real inspiration in my teen years, were the Road Warriors. Those guys were massive.
You met them.
And I actually had the privilege of meeting them on November 24th, 1990.
Wow.
It was at the Joe Louis Arena. I still have pictures with them. They're both deceased, God rest their souls. But that was a true experience that stuck with me. But those guys were really what motivated me. And when I got to high school, I was already into powerlifting and whatnot. And by the time my junior and senior years came around, I was holding records at West Bloomfield High School in the military press and the deadlift and the leg press. And following high school, When I started college in the fall of 1990, I also started training in Ishinryu Karate at Southfield Martial Arts Institute under Willie Adams.
That's who my dad studied under, Willie Adams.
Oh, that's right. You told me that. Yeah. And I learned a lot there. I was there for about 3 years, and they actually featured me on Fox 2 back in December of 1990 as one of the few blind martial artists in the country.
The blindness didn't stop him. Perfect pitch, piano, his own band, weightlifting record, karate, it's incredible what you've done. But we haven't talked about how much you've overcome even in your personal life. You had so many things happen. Tell us about what you've overcome and on the personal level with family.
Yeah, so my father was killed in his place of business on September 11th, 1974. I was only 3 years old at the time, and I had my sister Marianne, who was 2, and my mom was pregnant with my brother Junior at the time that my dad was killed. After my dad was killed, my mom married his brother, which was a common tradition at that time. If a mother lost, her husband, a lot of times the brother of the husband would step in and take over and help out with the family, and he would marry his brother's wife. And so that's what happened with us. My mom married my uncle, and so they had 3 more kids, when they got married. And my brother Angelo, who was born in 1982, through my mom and my uncle, was also born blind. In 1989, my mom was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, breast cancer, and she underwent chemotherapy for 6 months, and luckily she beat it. She went into remission. That lasted for about maybe 7 or 8 years. And in 1997, I want to say, the cancer came back, and this time it couldn't be beat. She lasted for 2 more years, and in 1999, on December 3rd, she finally succumbed and she passed from her cancer. Crazy enough, 3 weeks prior to her death, my brother and my cousin were on their way to St. Louis. They had a job opportunity out there that was really good, and they wanted to take it. So they're moving out there, and they got into a big car accident. They were driving a U-Haul truck. They got into a big car accident, and the truck flipped, and my brother lost his arm in that incident. His left arm was severed right up to the shoulder. And again, 3 weeks after that is when my mother passed on December 3rd of 1999.
Wow, it's incredible. I mean, all those things. You lost your dad at a young age. You lost your mom really at a young age. Your brother was blind. Your brother lost an arm. But it's, like I said, it's incredible what you've accomplished and continued on and doing so much.
I have to say that my biggest support has been the friends that God blessed me with along the way. While going through all those, I had great school teachers that were there to listen throughout high school and throughout college. I've been blessed. And I also met Mother Angelica, who was the founder of EWTN, the biggest Catholic network in the world. I met her in October of 1992. And so I can say that, I've been blessed to meet the people who I've looked up to most in my life. Maybe that's the Lord's way of giving me a gift to help me along on the road. And in 1992, I also met and was doing spiritual as well as therapeutic counseling with a phenomenal priest who is also now deceased. He was the assistant dean at the Sacred Heart Seminary in Detroit. His name was Monsignor Bill Easton. And I actually met Father Frank, aka Bishop Francis, through him. I was at the seminary one day. It was the summer of '94, and Father Frank, or Bishop Francis, was a seminarian at the time. It was a year before he was ordained, and I was there for a session with Monsignor Easton. I was coming out the back entrance of the seminary. It was a nice summer day, and the bishop was coming up the ramp to go in. He was just coming back from a soccer game. And that's where I met him. And that meeting was also fated, if you want to call it that, because in later years, Bishop Francis became one of my dearest friends and my greatest mentor through my darkest struggles. And so I feel like I've been blessed, with these great meetings. I don't think they were coincidence. Like I said, I think that, God blessed me with them. And then great friends like you came along, Mark. In later years, you were an inspiration. I had this project that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. It's been brewing for about 5 years.
Hold on, before we go to that project, we got to hear one funny story out of him. Tell us the story when cell phones first came out, how with your perfect pitch you're able to figure out everybody's password.
Oh, did I tell you about that? Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, so there were a couple incidents where, this was when people still had pagers, and so they would call their pager voicemail to see who was leaving them messages. So they would do it on three-way, and I would get their passcode. Because of my perfect pitch, I'd get their passcode. So then I'd start going into their voicemails and listening to their messages.
So it was the tone of each number that you could recognize.
Yep.
So you knew what numbers they were pressing for their passcode, yeah.
Yep. But the funniest, there was one incident where I had this girl's voice, her passcode, and after about 3 months of me messing with her voicemail, changing her voice greetings, all that stuff, I finally admitted to her. I said, "Listen, I just want you to know I had your voicemail code." I got cussed out, and she wouldn't talk to me for a month. But then one day came, she was working at my cousin's store, and I was there just visiting, and she went to check her voicemail. And she had the phone on speaker. So it's funny because she's about to punch in her code, and she turns around to me. She goes to me, "Turn your head." I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Turn your head." I'm like, "Why?" She goes, "Because I don't want you to see what numbers I'm punching in."
She'd know you're doing it by the sound, not by
exactly.
seeing it. So everybody in life has something they want to leave as their legacy, something they're passionate about that they want to, when they're gone, they want this to live on.
Yep.
Right now, you've started a project. Why don't you tell us about this project and what it's about, and this is going to be, you'd like this to be your legacy.
So I've had it on my mind for the past 5 years to do an organization that would provide something for either blind or all disabled. And I mean, I even tried it with 2 different organizations, and for some strange reason, both organizations loved the idea, but it just fell through with them. It didn't go through. And so last year, I have been experiencing some deep spiritual struggles for the last 5 years, I would say. And last year, I think things came to a head. I reached my peak, you could say. I was literally in a spiritual pit. It was pretty empty. And the idea of this nonprofit organization of doing something for the disabled kept popping up at me. It just wouldn't leave me alone. Even when I didn't think about it, I was thinking about it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so one day I was just talking to Mark, and I said, I'm still thinking about this organization, but I don't really know how to start it, where to start it. I don't really want to start something from scratch because it's going to take forever. And Mark just said, "Listen, man, this has been eating at you. It means that means there's something there, So you gotta pursue this by yourself. It doesn't matter how long it's going to take. Well, what are you gaining by not pursuing it? Nothing. So it's funny because I started all the paperwork, and in establishing the 501c3, started all the paperwork, and we were still kind of blind, no pun intended, in which direction this was going to go. And so Mark and I would talk, and I would say, I don't know, where do you think we should do this, and how is this going to work in terms of owning our own building, or we need money or whatever. So we just kind of kept whittling away at it, and one day Mark and I were just talking, and he just started telling me about the camp that the Chaldean Diocese had purchased out in Brighton.
And I interrupt you for 1 second.
Yeah.
And one thing I told him, Omar kept saying, like, we don't really know how we're going to do it. I said, listen, You just figure it out as you go.
Yeah, exactly.
I told them, don't think about I call it paralysis by analysis. You'll talk yourself out of doing something. So I just told them, I said, you got to just start doing it, it'll come together.
Right.
So go ahead.
So, and that's pretty much what I did. And I still, even after he told me that, I still felt unsure, uncertain, so one day we were talking, and somehow, some way, the camp in Brighton came up, Our Lady of the Fields camp. And Mark just started describing what they have there, which I wasn't aware that they had all the stuff. He said, you know, the camp, it's a really cool place. They've got nature trails, they've got lakes. I'm like, wait. I'm like, this is perfect for what I want to do, because at that time, you know, I finally realized what I want to do is I wanted to provide music, art, and nature therapy for those who are disabled. And so I'm thinking, I said, wait, this would be the perfect environment, the perfect atmosphere. And so I started looking into the camp, and things just kind of fell into place right then and there, and they just have continued ever since. So I was having lunch with Bishop Francis about a week after Mark and I had that discussion. It just so happened that I had scheduled a lunch with the bishop prior to this discussion, so I didn't even have it in mind. But then after we discussed it, I said, wait, I can talk to the bishop about this when we have lunch, because my intent with having the bishop that day, or having lunch with the bishop that day, was I was going to talk to him about my spiritual struggles. You know, I had no intention of talking to him about this organization up until Mark and I had this discussion. So then I said, you know, let me run it by him and see what
you told me. You said, do you think I should bring it up at lunch, or it's not appropriate? I'm like, yeah, bring it up. Of course, bring it up to him.
Right. And so you know, I met with the bishop, and you know, when I told him about it, he just loved it, and he loved it so much that he offered himself as one of my board members. And so then I started talking to other people, like Jane Shalal, who actually gave me a phenomenal idea. She told me to, you know, the disabled group is a great group. She said, but why don't you pursue the veterans as well? She said they have a lot of funding and they really would love something like this. So Mark is involved with a couple of veteran organizations, and I believe you're on their board, right?
Yeah, I'm on the board of the event we put on for him every year for the Fallen and Wounded Soldiers Fund.
Yep. And so I was telling Mark, I said, Mark, this is what was suggested to me, and he said, you know, let me put you in touch with them. So I got in touch with Chris Cornelius from that organization, who was super pumped once he found out what the idea was. And also, ironically, when I had lunch with the bishop, he informed me that they purchased a farm across the street from the camp, where they were planning on providing service horses to the servicemen as therapy. And I said, geez, this is falling right into place with what I want to do, you know, without even me trying at this point.
So now so this has come together. So now there's a board that's been put together with professionals in different parts, and people from the military and
doctors, psychologists, attorneys.
A lot of great people on the board.
School teachers.
Starting to come together. And what's the name of the organization?
So I decided to call it the Healing Arts of the Little Flower.
And how'd you get that name?
It's really a spiritual thing for me, mostly with this organization, because I was, again, last year I was having some very serious spiritual struggles. Also, what contributed to the spiritual struggles over the last 5 years is that I've lost most of my sight. Like I said, I can only see different shades of light at this point. So I started questioning, you know, does God exist, you know, or do we just go into nothingness after we leave from here? Well, I started praying to Saint Therese, who was called the Little Flower, and by praying to Saint Therese, I believe that this is what inspired me. This is what gave me the vision to do this. And so she's called the Little Flower. I decided to call the organization Healing Arts of the Little Flower.
And you had a little meeting with Catherine Lanny over at the Divine Mercy Center.
And I'm glad you reminded me about that, because that was actually what started my spiritual journey back upwards. That meeting took place on August 23rd of 2022. I met with Catherine Lanny over at the Divine Mercy Center. It was a great experience. because it was one of those things where I walked out of there going, well, I didn't really feel anything, you know? But a few days later, the cloud just kind of started to lift on its own, you know, after being there. And that's really what started my upward journey again, you know, spiritually. So I'm definitely grateful to the Divine Mercy, and it's a center that I plan on supporting in my own way.
In the last few years, it's funny because every time Omar would tell me he wanted to do this organization, he had this idea, and he tried to connect to some other organizations to work with them, and another one didn't work out. What did I tell you? If you believe in something, you got to do it yourself. You got to go for it. And if you go for it, because nobody will ever have the passion to get done what you want to get done.
Right.
And nothing makes me happier than seeing this is your legacy that you're going to leave. And it's coming together it's coming together faster than either one of us ever thought it could happen.
Oh,
it's like unbelievable.
I can't even say that enough. I'm overwhelmed and shocked a bit at how fast it has been coming together.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised at the amount and type of people that want to get involved with this. And several of the board members, of the potential board members, have also expressed a deep interest in wanting to work for the organization once we have, you know, funding and once it takes off and whatnot, which again would surprise me even more. But you know, it goes to show you that this is, you know, when you come out with a cause like this, that people want to jump on and help out because they see there's a need for it, and there definitely is a need for it.
People can sense when a cause is genuine, and when they do, it's amazing the people that have jumped on board with us that all want to be a part of it and help.
Right. We're going to provide music, art, and nature therapy for those who are disabled, whether they're blind, autistic, paraplegic, you name it, and also to our servicemen. And these groups, in my opinion, are some of the most overlooked but undervalued groups, you know, out there.
Yep, I totally agree.
And so, yeah, and so that's why, you know, and they need this service. You know, people have asked, like, what's nature therapy? Well, it's nature therapy is, hey, I want to go take a walk on the nature trail. That's part of my therapy. So they'll go with the therapist and they'll go take a walk on the nature trail and just talk to the therapist. And it's science. Science is proving. There's scientific evidence that proves and is continuing to prove that nature promotes both mental healing and creativity as well. So you combine that with music or art, and I think you have a phenomenal type of therapy program. In closing, I want to say that, you know, thank you to everybody in my life who's come along in my life and who's inspired me and who's mentored me. I've been blessed, like I said, in meeting people who are role models to me. And I forgot to mention that I'm a huge fan of J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. Those guys were huge, massive inspirations to me, spiritually, philosophically, you know, everything to do with life. Those guys, I learned a lot through their works. And, you know, I think it's through people's works, Mark, and I think you can attest to this for your love for Jimi Hendrix. Yeah. But you get to love people through their works. And these two guys, I got to love, and I have a lot of reverence for them and for their work.
And having a dose of humor and sarcasm helps you get through it too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mark and I talk about that all the time. You know, if you're not laughing at it,
you might cry if you don't laugh.
Cry, you know, so I want to, you know, just thank everybody who I've been blessed with in my life, you know, and who's been there for me in my darkest times, and who has inspired me to do what I've done and to continue to do what I'm doing.
Cool. All right. Well, Omar, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you next time on Welcome to the Deep.